I'm an animal control expert who specializes in cryptids. One cryptid is entering human homes more often than usual. This is a PSA. For years, I was the guy to call if you had a squirrel in your attic. I mean, to a lot of people, I'm still that guy, but over the last 20 years, I've branched out to other less common infestations. Now I'm the guy you call if there is a haunted doll rummaging through your attic or a Sasquatch trampling your flower beds. I love my job. The specializations I've acquired have allowed me to travel across the country, meet incredible people, and experience cryptids like few have ever done before. It doesn't hurt that the pay is great, but the stories are even better. I have one short story for you now. It's more of a public service announcement than anything else, really. I've dealt with every sort of infestation from Sasquatches, spray human urine around area of sighting, and it will avoid the area. Demonic presences usually need to bring a priest in. Sometimes can be tricked into inhabiting a lesser creature, like a frog. And jackalopes, it's just a bunny with some antlers. Put it in a cage and give the poor thing a carrot. But recently there has been one cryptid that has been growing more and more invasive into human settlements, the hide-behind. Most commonly found in the forests of the northern United States and Canada, the hide-behind is one cryptid that cannot easily be dealt with. In fact, I'm not sure it's even possible for one of these to be bagged and tagged, like we normally would with other cryptids. To my knowledge, no hide-behind has ever been killed, maimed, dazed, or even simply removed from a residence. Once it has made a claim to an area, whether it be a local forest, a cave, or even, in one particularly bloody case, a Bass Pro Shop, it will defend that area to the death. First documented by the Native Americans, then by lumberjacks in the PNW of America, the hide-behind is one of the lesser known, but cryptids on the continent, but without a doubt, one of the most dangerous. No one really knows what they look like. As the name suggests, as soon as they are seen, they quickly duck out of view to hide behind anything in the vicinity. In the wild, this would be trees and rocks. In your home, this could be a corner, a kitchen cabinet, a television, or literally anything else, as they can manipulate their body to hide behind an object of any size. In the few accounts of the sightings we have on record, they have been described as everything from a large bear/lion hybrid to a frail and elderly woman with long arms and rashes on her skin. Because of this wide discrepancy in their descriptions, they are believed to be shapeshifters that can change their shape based on what they believe will best get their potential victim to come closer and investigate the sighting. I don't know why the hide-behinds are moving into suburbs. I guess destruction of their natural habitat, but it is becoming a real problem. That's why I am going to share this story with you now, so you know what to do if one shows up in your home. I pulled up to Tim's house around 12 p.m. on a Tuesday. He had called in to tell us there was a demonic entity in his house, and we needed to remove it ASAP. They always demand ASAP. Tim had nothing going on, but people are so much more demanding than they were 20 years ago. I took a quick look around the house, and it was pretty apparent there wasn't any sort of demon in his residence. Not only was there no reaction to the holy water and Ouija board I had brought with me, but Tim also didn't have normal symptoms of a demonic haunting, bad dreams, sleep paralysis, or the witnessing of any telekinetic events. After further questioning, he described what he had seen in more detail. First, I was sitting right there on the couch watching television when I got the feeling I was being watched. I turned my attention to the screen door, and for just a second I saw a bear looking in through the screen. But it wasn't a bear, you see? A bear would just keep on staring at me, or keep poking at the door, but this thing just ducked out of view as quick as can be, like it was trying to sneak up on me and I had caught it in the act. It bothered me something awful, but I just grabbed my gun, set it on my lap, and kept on watching the TV, and eventually that feeling, like I was being watched, just kind of melted off. It was all peaches and cream until she showed up a few days later. The sheet Tim was referring to was a new human form that the hide-behind was taking. I assume it was because of the lack of a reaction to the bear form it had previously shown itself as. Like I said earlier, the hide-behind wants you to look for it, to come nearer. Like the angler fish, it dangles something in front of you in an attempt to bring you closer. It's a lazy hunter. I was out in the garage in my workshop, and that feeling come over me again. That being watched feeling. I turn around and I'm looking out the garage door, and I don't see nothing, but then out of nowhere I see a lady's head and shoulder pop out from the corner of the garage, and the second she sees me eyeing her, she pops right back around the corner where she came from. Well, this time, I went looking round for her. I gave a wide berth around the corner, 'cause I lived in New York City for a year in the 70s, so I've seen crazy people, and she looked crazy, and I didn't want her grabbing me. So, I gave a wide berth around that corner, and there wasn't no one there. I walked all around the house and I didn't see anyone. Not even footprints. Tell me that ain't demonic. It wasn't demonic. It was a hide behind, and I told the man as such. I told him living out here on the edge of town made him an easy target for it. I told him that there really isn't any way to get rid of them or scare them off. I told him he could try to leave his house for a year at minimum, and maybe, with luck, it would leave on its own, but the best bet would be for him to burn the place down and never come back. He didn't like that answer. My family lived in this house for 3 generations. I ain't leaving, and I sure as hell ain't burning nothing down. I'll tell you what I'm going to do. I'll keep my shotgun on me, and when I get that feeling again, I'll shoot it. Works for bears, and that's the meanest thing round these parts. Don't see why it wouldn't work for this. What did you call it? Hide behind. You can't argue with anyone over the age of 65. People get set in their ways, their beliefs calcify. So instead, I was honest with him. I told him 2 things. The first thing I told him was that eventually he'd get that feeling that he was being watched, and he'd get his gun, and he'd start looking around for the hide behind. Only he wouldn't find it. That's what happens in all these cases, because at that point, it found the best hiding spot it can possibly get, the only place you won't be able to lay eyes on it, even if you tried, directly behind you. And at that point, it's too late for you. The second thing I told him was that I'd be back in 2 days, and more than likely he'd be dead. And then I left. 2 days later, I pulled my van up Tim's driveway to find the screen door open and blowing in the wind. I didn't even need to cross the threshold of his house to find him. He was everywhere. On the floor, the ceiling, the walls. The smell was unbelievable. I poured some gasoline on the front porch and lit it with a match. The house was an inferno within 30 seconds. I got in my van and started to pull out of the driveway, and I took one last look at the house and then beyond it out into the tree line, where I saw, for just a split second, a young boy before he quickly pulled back and disappeared behind a thin little tree. I was hundreds of miles away by lunchtime. I say all of this to tell you, if you ever think you might have a hide behind in your house or even in the area, leave. Burn the place down if you can, so new people don't move it. These things are like bears. If they know they can get food someplace, they are just going to keep coming back. And if you get the feeling that you're being watched and you can't figure out why, call your loved ones, because it's standing directly behind you. Warnings to the wannabe cryptid hunters. The Devil Wears Sweatpants series. Ever lost your mom or dad at the grocery store when you were a kid? That's exactly how I felt when the prematurely closing elevator doors separated me from Yasik. I was grateful that Licorice was still there at least, but that didn't do much to distract me from the fact that I was plummeting down to the deepest level of hell without my trusty tour guide. The huge spider made of human body parts beside me honestly just made it all 10 times worse. I tried to keep it together. I really did. But when the cabin came to a halt and the doors opened, revealing a group of easily a dozen people waiting to push into the elevator, I could barely contain my frustration. Claustrophobia gnawing at me, I hastily shoved my way past the small crowd, closely followed by Licorice. I had to actually fight to get out, with everyone rushing into the opposite direction of me. The simple act of exiting the cabin turned into a physical struggle. At last, I staggered out onto the street, heart pounding. Okay, stay where you are. Yasik's gonna find you. I tried to calm my nerves. Licorice soothingly licked the side of my face, and I gratefully dragged a weary hand over his scraggly fur. Everything would be all right. I'd just have to stay where I was and wait for Yasik to make his way over to me. Planting my feet firmly on the ground beside the elevator, I nervously stared at the shaft. I tried not to pay too much attention to my surroundings. The painful reality of my current situation had begun to sink in. These weren't my woods. I wasn't walking among the tall, frost-painted trees. There was no snow to pleasantly crunch beneath my shoes, no winter sun smiling down at me. This was the very lowest sphere of hell, a densely populated city where everything was blazing flames and billowing smoke that swallowed the light. And worst of all, I had no idea what to expect of this place and its inhabitants. The Leshy was scary, yes, I never knew what to make of him either, but this was different. At home, the creatures were familiar. They terrified me, sure, They were all deadly in their own way, but I knew them. I had grown up with stories of them, with cautionary tales as well as humorous anecdotes. I was aware of how dangerous they were when at their worst, but also of how benign when at their best. Thus, I had seen the best and the worst of the Leshy, but neither of anybody in this godforsaken hole. I felt alienated, completely helpless in the face of this foreign environment. Everything here was utterly unnatural. Nobody here was assuming a different form to hide their monstrous appearance. Nobody's voice was made to sound like a bird song or the wind. This wasn't my world. I spun around upon hearing the ding of the elevator, and when Yasik stepped outside, I abandoned all thoughts of boundaries and dignity and threw myself into his arms. I didn't do it out of some romantic notion or to play the damsel in distress. I acted purely on impulse. I didn't get why at first either. But when Yasik wordlessly leaned in to hold me, I realized that this was familiar, comfortable even. I soaked up the feeling of safety he exuded like a sponge. Eventually, we awkwardly untangled ourselves, each having to look away for a moment and take some deep breaths. "You're shaking," he observed after a few seconds. "Uh-huh," was all I could manage to say. He snorted. "That is so. I never thought you could look this uneasy anywhere. Honestly, when I took you down here, I thought it wouldn't be a problem for you." To my surprise, he didn't sound reproachful or condescending, just genuinely surprised and a tad apologetic. "You're okay, right?" "Sure," I said quickly. "Lord, I'm sorry, gorgeous. Well, I'm here now. I'll stay close." It was all I could do not to ask him to hold my hand while walking. The streets in Pride were even more crowded than what I'd seen in Wrath. People kept shoving past us, getting uncomfortably close and brushing our shoulders with no regard for personal space. The fear of being trampled to death seemed concrete and imminent. Licorice helped cut our way through the bustle, but I still flinched every time I could feel a stranger's breath on my face or another arm touching mine. "Don't worry," Yasik said to me from the side. "They only care about themselves. What do you do down here anyways? Are these all sinners?" They were at one point. See, the boss has two main objectives for the lot of us. First, we obviously work on and encourage society's downfall as slowly and excruciatingly as possible. That's what I do on the surface. I only come here to attend meetings and go grocery shopping and stuff. Much cheaper than up top. "Oh yeah? What are you working on exactly?" I inquired. He lit up. "It'd take a while to explain. I'm on several different projects, but I'd love to show you sometime." He cleared his throat. "Once we're out of here. If you want to see." "I'd love to," I replied in earnest. "So what's going on down here?" "Okay, so the folks around us actually work and live here. They were sinners at one point, but they never overdid it. The boss doesn't employ serial killers or tyrants or what have you. Those he actually detests, because they're doing to humanity what he wants to do. Encroaching on his territory, you know. Therefore, the real scum goes in the prisons. Each of the spheres has one, and these good people here spend eternity tormenting the inmates, which is something of a punishment in itself. Oh, and of course some people also run the stores and clubs and stuff like that. But the boss presides over all." "Oh, huh. I guess I always thought hell would be more medieval-like. Not a huge modern metropolis," I remarked. "How so?" "Corporate greed, working in a dead-end job until the end of time. An unfeeling boss who ruthlessly plays favorites and never gives you a word of appreciation unless you incessantly kiss his ass." "So you're saying you're an ass kisser?" "The worst. But it's easy for me. I'm not like the rest. I willingly gave myself over to him. I didn't wait until I died. He just loves that end. Seeing as it doesn't happen every day, I get the special treatment and the nicest jobs. I often run his personal errands, too, like an old-time gentleman's servant." He chuckled. "It's great fun, really. It was good you left the mill then. You seem to truly enjoy this," I muttered pensively, feeling an unwelcome, inexplicable sting in my chest. "Totally. All right, we made it. Look." He pointed up a building that would have put the Trump Tower to shame. It stood out among the others due to mere lavishness. Before I had more time to admire this impressive feat of architecture, Yasik had already started dragging me into the building's spacious lobby. He went right up to the desk where an annoyed-looking woman with short hair greeted him with little enthusiasm. Her mouth had been stitched shut, blood encrusting the seams. She couldn't talk properly, only pressing out short, muffled sentences. "Hey, Karen, is the boss in?" "Sure," she mumbled. "He's in his TV room. I'll tell him you're coming." "Thanks, you're a doll." Jacek led me up to another, smaller elevator, lighting a cigarette as he went. "Is smoking indoors allowed here?" "It's strongly recommended." This elevator ride was much more harmonious, but I was still getting more and more tense the higher we got. When the elevator finally dinged its arrival, I was shaking like a leaf. "I'm going nuts," I confessed. "Not to make things awkward, but can you hug me again? Just for a second?" Jacek gave me a surprised look. Then, he wordlessly turned to me, removing his cigarette from between his lips to hold it far away from me as his other arm snaked around my waist. My throat had suddenly gone bone dry. I pressed myself up against him for a mere moment until he pulled back, chuckling awkwardly and moving to step out through the opening doors. "Relax, the boss is chill." "Okay, there we go." Jacek led me and his jumpy dog down a couple corridors before finally stopping in front of a black door. He knocked and we waited for a beat until an annoyed-sounding voice told us to come in. Jacek held the door for me and we stepped inside. It was a nice, large room with a big flat screen mounted to the wall and a cushy gray sofa facing it. While this room was a relatively tame sight, the person, or rather creature, standing in the middle of it instantly drew a scream from my throat. He was the size of a person, but at the same time that of a bull, or a football field, or maybe a whole continent, despite being able to fit into that room. He turned to us with a smile that had too many teeth and also none at all. When he opened his mouth to speak, I stared down into a black, endless hole. I didn't know what I was seeing. My mind was howling, trying to comprehend, trying to piece these conflicting impressions together. My thoughts were racing, my heart pounding. The longer I looked at this thing, the more everything seemed to spin out of control. I fell to my knees. Why couldn't I understand this? Were my eyes deceiving me? Was this real? Was anything real? No, nothing was real anymore. Nothing was true. Nothing could be believed. "Oh, I see we've got company." A rich, gentle baritone cut through my frantic haze, and suddenly, I wasn't looking at something incomprehensible anymore. What was standing there in front of us wasn't a cosmic nightmare anymore. It was a man, leaning casually against the back of the couch. A normal-looking, middle-aged guy with a gray-streaked beard and an open, carefree smile. He was barefoot, only dressed in sweatpants and a t-shirt. Lovely. "Jacek, I'll go out on a whim here and assume that this little firecracker is the infamous Fiona Novak?" "She is." "Fiona, this is well, my boss," Jacek said. I slowly got to my feet and walked over to the man, the devil, reaching out to take his extended hand. It was warm and soft. "It's a pleasure to meet you. Call me Nick." "Hi," I croaked. "It's, good to meet you too. Sorry about before. I sometimes forget that my appearance is an acquired taste," he said, squeezing my fingers with distinct pleasure. "So, as I am prone to understand, you've been brought here by Mr. Hetman to ask a favor of me." "Yes, sir." I mean Nick." Suddenly, we were on the other side of the couch. We hadn't moved an inch, not on our own accord, and yet, we found ourselves closer to the TV by several feet. The devil plopped down, sighing contentedly. "Sit," he commanded. Jacek took a seat beside him, and I followed suit, thankful for the shield my former boyfriend established between the beast and myself. Despite not seeming put off by the unsettling nature of the other man in the slightest, he appeared to be acutely aware of my own discomfort. "Nice try, Jacek." Without having gotten up, the devil was now sitting by my other side, uncomfortably close. "I'll thank you not to play the knight in shining armor. Now, Miss Novak, you're not really an advocate or follower of mine, are you?" His tone didn't sound accusatory in the least. "What makes you think you can come in here and accost me?" he asked genially. I squirmed uneasily, avoiding his gaze, not sure how to handle these conflicting messages. "I guess I just need help," I stammered. We all do sometimes. The man put an arm around me, pulling me close and rubbing my shoulder. Jacek jumped to his feet, staring at his employer in shock. The devil laughed, letting go of me and waving him off. Cool your jets, Miller. If I wanted her, I would have had her already. Look at how she's shrinking away. He leaned forward, tapping Jacek's belly. If I wanted her, I could make her like it. Her response would be quite different then. I couldn't help but gag slightly in the back of my throat. I tried not to show it, tried to swallow it up. No use in antagonizing the being I was about to ask a huge favor of, as much as I would have liked to. Jacek lowered himself back down, chest heaving. The devil regarded Jacek with unrestrained amusement. Forgive me, son, but I simply had to know. Know what? I inquired, feeling a tad dense. The devil shrugged. Unimportant. All right, Fiona, state your case. What is it that you want me to do for you? You command the hidden people, don't you? They pay you a toll, after all. Do go on. I have a plot of land. I need it to be veiled somehow, obscured by magical means. People have been trying and succeeding to access it. Thought of putting up a fence? Sure, but the Leshy doesn't want that. He'd gut me. He's a bit odd. Oh yeah, I have a Leshy on my land. Nick grinned. You sure do. So, you want me to order the Huldafolk to hide it? Yes. An agonizing period of silence ensued. Then, the devil shrugged. Yeah, okay. What? That easy? Would you prefer I give you a series of inhumanely cruel tasks to complete in order to win my benevolence? And no, I hasten to reply. Good. The woods shall be hidden from all, except those you choose to inaugurate. Consider it done. He gave me a cheerful smile. You kids want a beer? Gladly, Jacek muttered. The second the word had left his lips, he and I were both holding a large can of Guinness each. Cheers. The miller clinked his can against mine, as I merely stared down at it in confusion. And there's nothing I have to do in return? I asked Nick. 'Cause you made it seem that way before. I did, didn't I? He smirked, clearly satisfied with himself. No, don't bother. Truth be told, I really like the Novak children. You're my third favorite. How come? We haven't met before, have we? No, but let's just say that I love the Black Miller very much, and he's told me quite a bit about you. Oh, great, I gritted out, giving Jacek a sidelong glare that made him hide his face behind the drink. I've already met your brothers, of course. That is to say, most of them. I nearly spat out a mouthful of beer. You needn't look so surprised, Nick remarked. You've met Marion? Is he here? I almost cried out. No, the guy upstairs never lets me have any of the children. Well, most of the time, at least. He took Marion, and honestly, I'm happy he did. Little pest that he was. I came to see him when he was waiting in purgatory, and he kicked me in the shin and told me to go fuck myself. Can you believe it? He laughed quietly. I remember it like it was yesterday, but that was before I learned more about you all. As for the one you call Casimir, I'm sure you'll know where he'll end up once his mortal body fails him. I drew in a slow breath. I suppose I can imagine. He's a good boy. I'll welcome him with open arms. The hunger that man displays, that unfeeling, lustful, entirely self-serving nature, seems awfully devoted to you, though. The devil shrugged. I watch him occasionally. I just love his coping mechanisms, you know? I appreciate that kind of behavior. I guess you would. Cass is a pretty winning guy. Definitely. And then there's Jeremy. I flinched so hard some beer spilled from my can. Nick smiled very, very sweetly. You haven't seen that one in a bit, have you? Do you know what became of him? I never found out, I confessed. The devil leaned in closer. Want me to show you? Fiona. No, Jacek chimed in. Turning to Nick, he added, we should go now. Thanks for your time, boss. I'll see you on Sunday. Wait, I want to see. It was against my own better judgment that I contradicted Jacek, but the truth of the matter was that I hadn't seen or heard from Jim ever since he had cut contact with me and the rest of my family over a decade ago. I had tried to look him up a bunch of times, but never found anything. Perhaps he'd chosen to change his name. Jacek swallowed audibly. It would really be better if you didn't. I was kind of surprised he would know anything about my younger brother, but before I could address his concerns, Nick had produced a remote and switched on the big TV across from us. I instantly pressed my hands over my ears as incoherent screaming and agonized wails rang out. The can of beer fell to the floor, its contents flowing freely over the carpet. More disturbing yet, however, was the image presented to me on screen. It was a man, not much younger than me, resembling distinctly the memories I had of Jim in our youth. He was handsome, not quite as much as Casimir, but definitely appealing. Or rather, he must have been at some point. As it was, though, he looked almost like a living corpse. He was wholly nude, drenched in blood that streamed out of several gashes all over his body. Under different circumstances, he'd have probably already bled to death, but he was still standing, bleeding, bleeding, bleeding. He was in a dimly lit holding cell. In the corner, a pile of what I reluctantly identified as feces, and he kept throwing himself against the bars again and again, howling like a madman. It was horrifying beyond measure. I couldn't say a thing, merely covering my eyes helplessly until Nick turned off the TV and the noises ceased. Well, I reckon that was a bit distressing to see. But trust me, he's getting what he deserves. I don't take kindly to people who seek to topple humanity themselves. That's my show to run. He let go of a soft sigh. Jeremy Novak, serial killer. Never got caught to face a human jury, and after number 42, I just had to intercede. So I sent someone to prematurely collect his soul for me. He gave me a swift pet on the knee. And I bet you can guess who. Let's Talk Cryptids series. If you're here, then that means we already have at least one thing in common: cryptids. Whether you love them, hate them, or you're looking for proof of them. The fact you're reading this post means you're interested in them too. I'm a critic keeper of sorts, kind of like a park ranger for the less than normal. I'm generally hired on a case-by-case basis. Communities from a small farming village right up to metropolis-sized cities can call people like me in to investigate strange animal behavior, mysterious disappearances, or unbelievable witness reports, and I or someone like me will go in, look around for traces of anything left behind that a normal person might have missed. Usually, it's nothing out of the ordinary, but occasionally, there will be something else involved. It might be you notice scratch marks too far up a tree, a sense of foreboding near a particular place, or if you're really unlucky, you might hear the voice of someone you know that really shouldn't be there. This job is pretty tight-lipped. If I were to say just sit at a bar and start talking about hunting the werewolf spotted in the area or the siren singing at the local beach, you would either think I'm a total nut job or be too frightened to leave your comfy little condo again. But something is changing in the unseen world just behind ours, something that worries me and has the potential to become incredibly dangerous to those who are unaware of everything around them. So I thought if I began talking about it, fairly vaguely, but with clarity where it counts, then maybe you'll know the signs when you see them, you'll know not to ignore them, and maybe you'll be able to figure out what to do when you do notice the signs. So I'll start this cautionary tale where it started for me. 3 weeks ago in northern England. I forgot what the place was called, but it's a popular place for cavers. This is why I was called in. The area had an abnormally large number of deaths and disappearances in the caving system over the last year. The town officials were at their wits' end. The local pros refused to look any further into the caves, claiming the area that needed investigating, where the bodies had been found, was too far off the public route. No one should have been able to get there at all. The overhead rocks were unstable, the rope lines were frayed, and all the walkways were corroded. They had never led a group near there and had no intention of going in themselves. With pressure from higher governing bodies to close the mine if nothing was done, they caved, pun intended, and called for someone more accustomed to the strange. The local pros agreed to fit me for gear and lead me to the entrance of the closed-off part of the system. No biggie for me. I've had to squeeze through some pretty nasty places with no safety at all. All suited up, headlamp, harness, and radio attached. They lead me to an old iron gate, sealed off with hazard tape and chained together. "See," yelled the shortest of my two guides. "Malcolm? I think his name was. Look, this place is locked tight, and we're a good 5, maybe 10 minutes from the normal route. How could they end up down there?" Pointing downwards from inside the gate, into a great massive expanse of inky blankness. There are not even any light lines here. They couldn't have just wandered down. I won't lie, at this point, I was fairly annoyed with my guides. They had done nothing but bitch, whine, and proclaim it wasn't possible from the moment we got in the car. I really didn't need the headache. I turned and looked him square in the face and told him, "Look, Malcolm, I get that you're concerned about the caves, maybe even a bit freaked out, but it's probably just some wild animal that's found another way in and made itself at home," which I honestly believed. It was too early in the year for the more dangerous cryptids to already be out hunting. I could probably expect to find a few imps or hobgoblin down there. That is the kind of place to hide out from the bigger creatures until the weather began to cool. A skinwalker maybe, though they typically prefer more wooded areas and only usually take 1 or 2 victims a year. Ignoring the rest of the complaints from Malcolm and the other guide, I asked for the key to the gate and told them I'd be okay from here. I'd radio if I needed any help, not that they would have been much help anyway. Opening the gate was more difficult than I expected. The old rusty lock groaned in protest at being forced to move again, creaking like nails on a chalkboard as I made the tumbler rotate from its resting place. With a hefty shove from my padded shoulder, the rusted closed gate finally opened and I could begin the work I came here for. As I slowly edged along the walls of the cave, I could see many tiny little eyes staring back at me from crevasses and hollow holes in the cave walls. Imps, pretty harmless unless you accidentally hurt one. They tend to be more afraid of humans than we are of them. Like spiders. When I say imp, I don't mean the tiny guy with horns and a tail like you're probably imagining right now. Imps are small, yes, but they are actually a part of the gnome family. The common appearance is that of a small, hairy humanoid, except for the head. They like making caves their home as they tend to live off the mushrooms that thrive in dark, humid places, even the poisonous ones. If you ever go caving, take a few chestnut mushrooms in your pocket. If you spot small round holes in the rock walls, leave one there. They will love it, and if you happen to find yourself lost, these friendly cryptids will help guide you out of the caves by poking you and pulling your clothes in the direction of the exit, right up until they see human-made lights. They don't like our lights. They're too bright for them. I left a few mushrooms scattered around me to let them know I was friendly, and I didn't mean to hurt them, and carefully made my way forward, being watchful of anything growing on the floor. I didn't want to ruin any food they had grown. After another few minutes of edging along the walls, looking for signs, I spotted something that concerned me. A lot. Deep, evenly spaced scratches along the far wall, like a hand. Not good. Not good at all. I took out my mobile, took a quick look around me to make sure there were no imps nearby. Before turning on the camera and flash, took a quick picture and stood perfectly still to examine it properly. I didn't want to risk a misstep and spraining my ankle or worse by trying to walk a narrow line and look at my phone. Surviving Cryptid Work Lesson 1. Know what you're dealing with before it deals with you. I learned early on in my work to try and memorize as many signs for cryptids as possible. After being stuck in a forest with nothing but a mobile phone with no battery, a bottle of water, and a hunting knife for a week, not knowing if I was the one doing the hunting or the one being hunted. Not even knowing what it was I was looking for, I learned fast. I knew this sign and it was nothing good. It shouldn't have been there, or that active for that time of year. Wendigo. I wasn't prepared for this. I had nothing with me that could help me. I nervously made my way forward, looking for more signs to either confirm or deny what my anxiety and experience was telling me that it was. But it made absolutely no sense. I mean, sure, this would be a perfect place for a Wendigo, but it was too close to civilization, too close to roads, not to mention Wendigo activity in this area had never been recorded before. And they don't normally mass hunt until late fall in preparation for the long winter shut-in, which is why in certain areas you might be told hunting in the fall months is prohibited. A small safety net to keep as many people out of its hunting grounds as possible. Surviving Cryptid Work, Lesson 2. Learn to know when to run, when to hide, and how to survive. This wasn't normal Wendigo behavior, and the more I ventured in, the more I was convinced. In most cases, when a victim is taken by a Wendigo, it's quickly and quietly. They are superb hunters, but their appetite is unending, which is part of the Wendigo curse. Their victims are usually devoured quickly, starting with the limbs and working inwards. Only in the late fall going into winter do they tend to preserve their prey for any amount of time. But as I crept closer through the cave, my headlamp illuminated several bodies, all still meaty. I had no idea what to do or expect. The next sign of Wendigo certainty. There were bones scattered near my feet. I almost stood on them. That would have been the end of this if I had. Their senses are heightened beyond what we have been able to compare it to so far. If I had stood on one, it would have heard me and instantly known where I was. I would have been just another body in the pile. Wendigo are also in the humanoid category, so the next sign was to check the bones. I slowly lowered myself into a squat position, trying not to move too much or do anything that might make noise, picked up a large femur bone, male I'm guessing, and checked it carefully in the glow of the headlamp. Yep, sign 2. Human-sized bite marks on the bones. It had been scraped clean. I hadn't actually seen the Wendigo yet, thankfully, but I had enough information to know what I was dealing with. Time for lesson 2. Know when to run, or in this case walk slowly and carefully out of that damn cave. I made it back to the main corridor of the cave, where I had seen the imps, and something had really scared them. They were tugging and poking me all the way up to a few feet from the gate, just before I could see the lights from the main tourist route. The imp's senses are far better than mine, especially in here. They heard it before I did. The sound of nails on rock, clawing its way up, the heavy breathing as climbed into the caves from an unseen opening. Then the screaming. A Wendigo's scream can be deafening, a low, thunderous rumble that reverberated through the caves and made my blood run cold. How far was it? Could I get out in time? Why was it here? If this was normal activity, I'd have just told them to close the mines until summer, when it would likely move on to its next hunting ground. I knew I'd have to go back, but a lot more prepared. I knew what I was dealing with now. It would be difficult, dangerous, and maybe deadly if I made even a slight mistake. But this wasn't right. It shouldn't be here. I had to know why. Warnings to the wannabe cryptid hunters. When shit hits the fan. Series. I had made up my mind this morning. I was going to ask Jacek to bring me a prisoner. I haven't forgotten about Tom Hayes, mind you, but I would need to take my time with him, and not just because he potentially still had my soul. There's more to him, though, I'm certain. I've got a whole interrogation planned. So yeah, I'm totally on it. But first things first, I needed to save Alexei. If the Leshy were to die, there wouldn't be a forest left for me to protect. So I informed Casimir and told him to look into the family angle, namely to try and figure out if there was any possibility that one of our siblings could have ratted me out. Also, I asked him to warn the employees of the hostile demonic entity roaming the woods. Then I tried to call Jacek, but he didn't pick up. That really put me on the spot. I'd have to get down to hell somehow, after all. Then I got an idea. After a bit of searching, I found one of his unfinished cigarettes out on the porch and decided to try my luck. I stepped out into the snow and lit it up, attempting to remember the words he'd said to open the portal. Fire, walk with me? My voice quivered with uncertainty, but when I dropped the cigarette, it set the snow aflame in much the same way Jacek had before. Moved by a sudden burst of confidence, I proceeded down the trail. The walk through the corridor had me wishing I could just turn and go back. So eerie was the quiet emptiness. I was almost beginning to doubt I'd come across a door at all when it suddenly appeared in front of me. I gratefully flung it open and entered a place that glowed so brightly I had to shut my eyes for a moment. When I dared to look, I found myself on a street not unlike the one I'd seen in Wrath and Pride before. The sky in this sphere of hell was of a faint green hue, and it was nearly as densely populated as the others, except here, there was a notable lack of groups and pairs. Everyone about appeared to be by themselves, and no matter who I passed, they all looked at me kind of funny. I tried not to stare at their various deformities. Some had skin the color of a bog, with lumps and stores covering it like bubbles. Others had a distinct surplus of fingers and hands. After roaming the sidewalk aimlessly for a little while, I braced myself and stepped up to a woman with a hole the size of my head in her stomach. "Excuse me, where's the nearest elevator?" She pointed wordlessly in response, and I hastily moved on. The elevator wasn't as busy this time. I appeared to be the only one waiting outside the cabin. When it arrived on my floor and the doors slid open, I was only a little surprised to find the human spider waiting behind them. Forcing a smile onto my face, I entered. "Don't I know you?" the spider asked. "Actually, yes. I was here a couple days ago." "Right. The scared little newbie. All alone this time. How come?" I didn't know how to feel about this creature getting all conversational on me, but I didn't want to be rude either. "I'm actually looking for someone."
Jacek Hetman.
Do you know him by any chance? Sure, I remember. He was with you the last time. Think I saw him earlier with his little clique. Lust probably is your best bet. Try the hole. That a drinking joint? Their favorite. We began our ascent, and I thanked the spider before stepping out of the elevator. Looking around, I was surprised to see that the hellsphere of Lust strongly resembled the kind of red light district you'd find in a lot of big cities. At the same time, I felt like I was setting foot into a carnival. Either time worked differently down here, or it was always night in Lust. Darkness had settled above the roofs of buildings and the tops of skyscrapers. A rose-tinted moon hung in the sky, surrounded by twinkling stars. The streets were shrouded in thick fog, pink light catching in the wafting, swirling plumes. Neon signs illuminated large, shifting crowds as music blared from open doors. The ground seemed to vibrate with the beat. Despite my own better judgment, I found myself strangely elated, marveling at the sights and sounds. My senses were being battered, but it was weirdly beautiful. I began looking around, a spring in my step. Hole, hole, hole. The establishments I passed by, though visibly seamy, looked strangely inviting. Eventually, I came across a purple sign spelling out exactly that name. Taking a deep breath, I stayed myself, patting down my skirt as I marched up to the double doors. They were guarded by a broad lady bouncer who gave me a lopsided smirk. "All in white down here," she commented. "You sure know what'll get you noticed. Does that mean I can get in?" "Sure, you walking bit of blasphemy," she laughed, holding the door for me. Beaming at her, I slipped inside. The club was packed. It was hard to take so much as a single step towards the center of the room without tripping over at least two other people. Some really intense beat was booming throughout the room, the stale air shivering with the rhythm. Amidst the bright flashes rotating through the darkness, the chatter and the noise, it took me a moment to realize that the partygoers had actually formed somewhat of a circle around a person in their middle, watching and cheering them on. Curious, I cautiously pushed and shoved my way through the crowd, until I was standing right in the front with nobody blocking my view anymore. My heart skipped a beat before dropping into my stomach when I laid eyes on him. Jacek was dancing like a wild fairy, throwing his arms, spinning and shuffling his feet loosely, looking utterly dramatic and totally relaxed at the same time. He was dressed even better than the last time I'd seen him, sporting a crimson shirt underneath a mesh long-sleeve top. Somehow, he met my gaze from across the room, but he didn't stop moving, staring right at me with effortless intensity. I took in his face. In the short time we'd been apart, he'd apparently gotten a new hairstyle. The sides and back were cropped in a handsome undercut, leaving fluffy, jet-black curls on top. Then I realized he was wearing makeup. Dark red powder adorned his cheekbones and brows, with a bunch of little pentagram stars and hearts drawn onto it in white. Eventually, the song ended and Jacek straightened up, arms dropping to his sides and a grin slowly unfurling on his lips. There was a mere moment of silence before the music started up again, and Jacek's voice filled it immediately.
Fiona.
I fucking melted. Jacek stepped forward, casually resting a hand on my arm. "Stay on your feet there now."
Fine.
I sputtered, instantly cringing. "I mean, I'm fine. Funnily enough, I kind of expected to see you here today. Just a hunch." He started pulling me over to the bar as the music got louder again. "Let's get you something to drink." "Oh, okay. Hey, so, the new hair. I love it," I stammered out. "And the makeup. How come I only get to see this now?" This seemed to genuinely take him aback. He raised his fingertips to his cheek. "Actually, I put it on whenever I've got the time. Do you like it?" I nodded eagerly. He laughed. "You know, I actually didn't put on any of it when I went to see you, 'cause I was sure you'd make fun of it. And my buddies kept saying it looks girlish and weird. As if." I snorted. "Wait, you saying you cared about what I'd think?" He stayed silent for a beat before merely shrugging. He gave the bartender a friendly wave and held up 2 fingers. The other man nodded and started mixing something. "What brings you here? Want a prisoner for your ritual after all?" He had to speak directly into my ear to drown out the music. "Yeah, I've decided I'll keep Tom Hayes for later. I ain't got my soul back yet, So in the end, I might have to rely on him to tell me where he's been keeping it himself. So let's just have him thinking he's fine and safe for a little while longer. I replied against the side of his face, shivering when his cheek brushed against mine as he leaned in just a tad closer. The sole thing worries me in particular. Licorice isn't back yet, he said, rough lips tickling my earlobe. And not just cause of you. I need that dog to be okay. I've already failed him once. I was hoping to do right by the poor animal. I understand, I nodded, taking and squeezing his hand for a moment of solidarity. My breath caught in my throat when he didn't let go of it. I wouldn't have guessed he'd wait for me. I thought I didn't matter to him. You did. You must have. Something in my voice must have changed, because he drew back, looking at me with a guarded expression. I thought we had an understanding. We're friends, Fiona. Nothing more. Stop that. Stop what? Well, why that. Whatever that is. I'm sorry, I didn't mean to make you uncomfortable or anything. I winced, raising my hands apologetically. Did I? No, and not actively. I think it's just me, he stammered, shaking his head as if to clear his mind. When he faced me again, he did so with renewed, bright eyes. All right, you're here for a reason. What can I do to you? His face fell the second the words had left his lips. He instantly shouted, correcting himself. For you. I meant for you. Fuck sake. I decided not to push it. I'm here to circle back on that offer. I need a prisoner. Honestly, I would have just sacrificed Tom Hayes and gotten him out of the way, Jacek replied, briefly turning away from me to receive the 2 drinks the bartender was now sliding across the counter to him. He handed me one, ensuring that our fingers didn't brush once during the contact. That would have been rather an elegant solution, no? Not everything can always work out smoothly, I commented, inspecting the liquid in the tall glass. It was different hues of red, all swirling as if animated. Strangely hypnotic. Jacek reached out to clink his glass against mine. Cheers. He downed the whole thing in a heartbeat. Clearing his throat, he added, Well, who am I to get in the way of your plans? The elevator spider told me you were here with your friends. I frowned. A strange sentence to say out loud. Am I? How strange. He gave me a fetching grin. Can't see them anywhere. Let's just ditch the whole lot. Wait, just a second. Am I, ruining your night out right now? Oh, Fiona, you're saving it. We left the club behind and started shoving our way down the crowded streets. So we're really going to one of the prisons now? I inquired, heart in my throat. No need to be scared. I'm with you. But I should tell you, I need to talk to Nick first. Hope that's all right with you. Sure, whatever needs doing, I hastily attested. I wasn't exactly keen on seeing the devil again, but if it was necessary. Jacek and I stuck together as we headed back to Nick's office. Pride was busy as ever, but I wasn't quite so afraid of its inhabitants anymore. I still felt a distinct sense of unease, but it was nothing compared to the first time. Besides, Nick looming over it all disturbed me a lot more. By the time we reached his office building palace, I was feeling rather unnerved. I kept thinking about how he'd pulled me closer and rubbed my arm, shuddering each time the image pressed itself into the forefront of my mind. We went up to his room anyway, and Jacek knocked and called out to him, as he had the last time. When Nick responded, he sounded different than when we'd last spoken. Deeper, rougher, angrier. It seemed to cause even Jacek to hesitate. I've got Fiona Novak with me again, he shouted through the closed door. Could you take on a comprehensible form, perhaps? Well, come the fuck in and see. Both of us flinched. There was no going back now, though. I swallowed thickly as Jacek cautiously opened the door, stepping inside ahead of me. Looking over his shoulder, I found that Nick only remotely looked like the last time I'd seen him. His skin was dark red, golden lines streaking it like cracks in an eggshell. It was sort of beautiful, His face unnerved me a lot more. He wore a harshly furious snarl, brows furrowed with wrath and abnormally large teeth bared. Boss? What's wrong? My ex inquired, now audibly and visibly alarmed. He regarded Nick with genuine concern as he took a couple tentative steps towards the other man. Everything is going to absolute shit, son. the beast growled, seemingly attempting to keep some semblance of composure. Now, don't ask. I know why you're here.
Come closer.
Obediently, Jacek approached him once more. You too, Miss Novak, Nick commanded. I could hardly refuse. Now, you too. I have a bone to pick with you too. Nick's chest was heaving, shoulders trembling ever so slightly in barely restrained anger. Jacek Hetman, who is your lord and master? My boyfriend let out a soft, incredulous snort. That'd be you, sire. Huh. And what have you sworn to me? My undying fealty and eternal servitude. I am your willing attendant and the hand by which you inflict pain and provide love. I will act as you need me to act and be what you want me to be for as long as my eternal soul persists. There you go, Nick said, eyes and voice a gentle kind of chilling. And do you still hold this oath in your heart? Figurative though that heart of yours may be. Of course, Jacek answered without hesitation. Nick smiled bitterly. I'm a jealous man, Jacek Hetman. You're mine by right. You gave yourself to me and me alone. Have you forgotten that? Not once. Then how come you seem to be at this bitch's every beck and call? The devil's voice cut through my unsettled haze like a knife. Jacek's eyes widened, lips parting in an absent expression of shock. Nick pursed his lips. Thought so. Sire, I swear it's not like that. Jacek immediately raised his voice, fists clenching and opening repeatedly at his sides. I have been at your disposal since I can remember forming conscious thought. I'd never betray you. You know I love you. You know I'd do anything. Always have. You cannot seriously doubt my loyalty. Look here, son. This isn't a matter of simple obedience. Yes, I'm satisfied with your work. Yes, you remain amongst my favorites. But that's just the thing. I don't want you to mindlessly follow my orders. I am the rightful holder of all your love and affection. I wouldn't mind you running after the girl so much if you'd bed her from time to time. But for crying out loud, you let her command you like she's me. I didn't care at first, but I've had just about enough of it by now. I'm in a tight spot as is, and seeing you turning your back on me, well, I would never turn my back on you. And I don't let her command me. I decide to help her occasionally because I want her to be all right. And what do you take in return? Nick asked sharply. Were you ever planning on taking anything in return? Don't fool me, boy. I've seen the way you look at her.
Tates reverence.
The kind of reverence you owe me and nobody else. The devil's tone was piercing, ice cold. I could feel my heart beating in my throat. Rooted to the spot, all I could do was slowly turn to face Jacek. He pointedly avoided my gaze. When he reluctantly spoke up again, it was in a subdued, quiet voice. I swear that you are all that I adore. The devil's smile thinned. Liar, he said softly. Open your mouth. Jacek swallowed audibly, jaw clenching before forcibly relaxing. Stick out your tongue, Nick ordered. He did. Slowly, the devil reached out and placed the tip of his thumb below and his index finger on top of it, right around the middle. I could hear Jacek's breathing growing labored. I had no idea what was about to happen, but I didn't want to find out. Please don't hurt him, I whispered helplessly. If Nick heard me, he didn't let it on. Now, son, I'll forgive you. Someday. But I'm severely disappointed, and misbehaving children need to be punished. With that, the devil squeezed down, crushing the red, moist flesh between his fingertips as Jacek let out a muffled, yet blood-curdling cry of pain. The scream rang out once again, louder than before, as Nick snapped his arm back and pulled, tearing through the muscles with merciless violence. I shrieked, all good sense abandoning me, and threw myself against the devil's chest with all my might. This actually seemed to catch him off guard, sending him stumbling with me upon him. It only lasted a moment, though. Nick let out a howl of fury as he flung me off of him. I flew across the room, feeling like I weighed little more than a flimsy ragdoll until my body connected with the floor in a flurry of nausea and dull pain. Jacek had doubled over. He was retching and spitting blood, whimpering like a hurt animal. What the fuck did you do to him? I yelled at Nick, who regarded me with unreadable eyes. Liars speak with forked tongues, he said softly. Why in God's name would you? We don't swear like that down here, wench. He cut me off, sounding mildly amused. It was only when I raised my hand to wipe my eyes that I realized I was crying. The devil gave me a pleased expression as he watched me struggle to push myself up. Sauntering closer to me, he knelt down, bringing his face uncomfortably close up to mine. "Fiona Novak," he said in a low voice, "I've granted you a favor in the past. You have a debt to pay. I will let you take whatever you need from my prisons. I will grant you more power than a normal human has the right to possess when the time is ripe. Return to your home and expect me to seek you out in a few days. Hey, now, look at me. Stop weeping." He grabbed my chin, tilting it up and forcing me to meet his gaze. "I don't blame you for the miller's desires, but damn, am I going to use them?" He reached behind him and, seemingly out of nowhere, produced something I hadn't seen in a long, long time. Using a hellhound to rally a stray soul is in itself a completely rational thing to do. But these dogs do have a higher master, you know, as does your lover. My heart sank as I laid eyes on the white rabbit in the devil's arms. How? The dog, Fiona. It brought its prey back to me. Ready? Before I could respond, he thrust the ghostly critter up against my chest. My heart skipped a beat, and for a second, all I saw was a blinding white light. Nick rose to his feet, a satisfied smile on display. "Welcome back to the world of feeling, little forest bride." I can't describe what followed. I will, but I know I can't do it justice. It was like a tidal wave in my head, my heart, my stomach. It felt like a door collapsing, with the flood of emotions pushing against it from the other side crashing down on me, burying me like an avalanche. And suddenly, everything was there. Everything was connected. The tears on my cheeks felt hotter than ever before. My chest felt like it was being torn apart, like someone was plunging their hand into my flesh, rummaging around, searching, touching all, leaving nothing unseen. Shaking like a leaf, my mind scattered, not one thought able to fully form, I frantically glanced around the room, and then I saw him. It was like seeing him for the first time. He was in so much pain, pitifully curled up on the floor, his mouth covered in blood, and he was still coughing, and he was like an angel. He looked fucking sacred. He exuded happiness and warmth, and he looked like love, and he smelled like love, and why the fuck is he bleeding? He's not supposed to be bleeding. I started crawling over to the writhing form of Yasik, my Yasik, gathering him in my arms and pressing him against my chest as hard as I could. For a brief moment, I felt something I hadn't felt before. I had experienced approximations of it, yes, but never in this way, never. And then, all of a sudden, he disappeared. Yasik simply vanished into thin air, leaving me clutching at nothing. This tore me out of my stupor. I raised my head once more, vision blurred. Nick looked down at me with a cold kind of comprehension. "This sucks, doesn't it? Give him back to me," I pleaded, my voice hardly more than a whisper. "I will. That's a promise. But you have to do my bidding," he explained patiently, reminding me of what he'd just told me. "I'll lead you down into the prison. I'll give you an inmate for your little scheme. You'll have time to sort out the affairs of your land, and then I'll appear to you again. A favor for a favor. I won't ask for anything you can't give, but give you will. And then I'll let him see you again. But, purely out of interest, how do you feel right now?"